Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you a speaker that I've never met. And see, I love this because I've been around the PHP community long enough so that I know all the regular speakers. It's always exciting to me to see somebody new come in. So I am really excited to introduce to you Ayesh, and Ayesh is going to talk to us about PHP Enums. So Ayesh, I'm going to stop sharing. And it's all up to you, dude.
Hi, welcome to the second session of the day. Thanks, Cal, for the introduction. This is PHP 8.1 Enums. And before we start, you can download the slides from here, just in case you want to follow with the code. But this talk is very heavy with the code. My name is Ayesh Karunaratne. My surname is very difficult to pronounce. That's my tagline. I was born and raised in Sri Lanka, but I was living in different parts of the world, sometime in the Netherlands. You can find me on these Twitter handles and all these places. I wouldn't really spend a long time here. So back to PHP 8.1 Enums. Also, we like to call enumerations in English. And this is a feature in PHP 8.1. Now, PHP 8.1, it's not even released yet, but this is a feature that I'm personally very excited about, and I hope you will be too. And there are more messages in the mailing list, and there are previous attempts to bring enums to PHP, and it's finally here. But we are actually a little bit late to the game, because languages like Swift and TypeScript, Python, they all have enumerations in one way or the other. But at the end of this year, we will have PHP 8.1. So we are still talking about this feature that will be released in the future. Now, this RFC was created by Ilya and Larry Garfield. This is the second time that people tried to bring enums to PHP, but this time the vote was what passed, and we talk about this today. And end of this year, we will have enums. We will talk about this in 7 topics. First, we take a look at why we need enums, and if we are using enums, how it can improve. And then we take a look at how enums are implemented in PHP 8.1, and we take a look at some of the semantics of some of the rules that we have for enums. And in the last section, we will take a look at some of the usage examples, how you can try enums today, and how it works out with all the PHP versions. Why we need enums? Okay, so I have this example from a curl request. This is very common. This is what we usually write. Right? I like to highlight this part. So we set these parameters to the curl request using the names. So just by looking at this code, you can see that we set the URL to example.com, and then we set the HTTP version to version 2 and all these values. But if you actually see what's inside here, they are actually integers. We are just using these labels because it's readable. But inside PHP, it's actually a bunch of integers. To make this easier for us, just for the programmers, but not the program itself, we declare these constants in PHP to say curl URL is 10,002. These are just numbers, integers. But we use the label here because it's more readable. In PHP, they actually use these integers. So if you call var dump or if you serialize these values, this is what you will get. We also have this curl setup function. I like to highlight here that this is an integer. So from this function, if you just take a look at this function, what you will see is we will accept any integer. It can be -5, it can be 0, it can be 10,000. It doesn't matter. What we're trying to function declaration is that we accept an integer. Let's see how it plays out. So if you call curl setup with 10,002, that's a valid one because it just happens to be that curl opt URL is assigned 10,002, and it's a valid option. But if we code 10,003, that's not a valid one. So how do you know just from the function declaration that you're accepting only one of these valid options? But the funny thing is, if you call 10,004, that's a valid one. So you cannot say any number smaller than 10,003 is a valid one, because 10,003 is not valid and 10,004 is valid again. That's one thing we are trying to fix with enums. In fact, we have a solution to this, right? This is what we do with Symfony. This is what we do with Laravel, Drupal, you name it, we have this. So what we do is we create this class, and then we put a bunch of class constants inside, because they are class constants. So you can just take a look and you know that this belongs to this class. And we use these constants like this. So we create this new object, a new post, and then we update status with the class constant. Again, we are lying to ourselves, right? Because deep inside, they're actually strings. So when we call the constant, PHP actually says, oh, this is a string. I will use this string. But the problem is all of them are strings. We go back to the same problem with curl example. We say we will accept any integer. Here we are saying we will accept any string, but we are still lying because we know that we only have a limited set of options. So this is important. We have a limited set of options that the program can handle. This is an incomplete solution, because what if you make a typo when you call update status? Or what if you try to add a new value that looks okay, but you cannot really see if it's right or wrong? From the last example, you had to pass the value and see if there's an error. Here you have to pass the value and see if there's an error. So you can try to mitigate this by adding conditions. So when you try to pass this value, we check them against a list of values that we know. And if it belongs to one of these values that we can deal with, fine. If it's something else, we have to throw an exception, like here. We throw an exception right here. But again, we have the same problem because they are still strings. And what if you extend this class and try to add a new value? What if you forget to validate against one of these values? Because we make mistakes, right? That's the number one thing. We make mistakes all the time. With solid principles, we say objects should be open for extension, but closed for modification. But here, you can actually modify this object, because here, this is a public property. You can make it private, but there's always ways to get around these limitations. And it's very likely that we will have invalid state in our classes. And this is a problem that we try to fix with enums. So let's take a look how enums can help. In TypeScript, a very nice thing I like about TypeScript is that you can create a new type. This is one thing we cannot do with PHP. We have union types, but we cannot create a new type with a name. So with TypeScript, you can create, I'm going to create a new type called post status, and it can contain any of these 4 string values, and we give it a name. So in functions, you can say this function will accept a value called status, and the value should be post status. So if you try to pass a value that belongs here, this is a valid one, because in post status, we accept post status, and we pass a valid value, and this is a valid call. But if you try to pass a value that's not valid, say potato or potato, TypeScript will throw the exception for you. This is the cool thing, because with PHP, we had to check against the values we know, and we had to throw the exceptions ourselves. But in TypeScript, because this is a type, it can throw an exception right away. And IDEs can show these auto-completion values. Now, PHP Storm doesn't support enums yet, but I'm sure there will be. They're the sponsors as well. Thank you. So when you try to parse these values, IDEs can show these are the valid values. And if you try to pass a value that would throw an exception, PHP Storm or the IDE can just say right away before you run this code. They also, with TypeScript, you also have named. So instead of giving it a name, you can also assign it a string. So you can send this value in an API or send them values to the database and take them back. So you can give each of these members a name as well. In TypeScript and PHP, we have the exact same syntax. This is one of my favorite slides ever, because in PHP, we can do it now. Well, after a few months. This is the syntax we have in PHP as well, which we talk about in the next slides. Every enum, we start with the keyword enum, and we give it a name called post status, or any of these names we like to give it. And you can fill them with all the members. So all of these members, PHP takes them as one of these subtypes. So when you say, I'm accepting the type post status, what you're actually saying is you can pass any of these members. It can be draft or pending or any of these members in your enum. We go back to the same example, the one we didn't like, and let's see how enums can help. So we extracted these constants to this enum. So we don't actually have to use them. We can just remove them. So here, instead of saying we accept string, we say we will only accept post status type now. So this is more strict. Again, we update the function, the method parameter, to say we will only accept post status. Because this is the type validation now, we don't have to validate any of these things. Validation for us. Cool. So here, and we have to update how we use them. Before we had class constants, but we have enum members. The syntax is the same. So this is clear. We can remove a bunch of code that we don't need. And this is actually following solid principles. You cannot, this class is open for extension, but no one can modify this because we have strict types here to say that we will only accept these values. Done. In fact, we did have enums in PHP before. The Boolean type, when you say this function will return or accept Boolean values, you actually know in your head that these values must be true or false and nothing else. It's not null, it's not string, it's not zero. It has to be true or false. So we just take the concept of Booleans and just expand it to have any number of enums, any number of types that we like to have, and give it a cool name as. And then we look in PHP 8.1. So like I said in the example, the syntax is enum, and then we give it a name. So this is a valid enum because enums can have 0 or more members. So here we can have 4. You can have 0, you can have 10,000 if you like. Don't do this, but you can have 10,000 members. And so this is a very important thing, that in PHP, these enumerated members, they behave almost like objects, but they are not exactly objects. This function, it says true because it follows most of the semantics of class objects. But if you compare them, they are not the same. We have some examples. And there's a new syntax for enums. If you call var_dump, you'll get this syntax saying this is an enum of this member. They can be namespaced. So this is very easier to refactor code, because before with the curl example, we had a bunch of constants in the global namespace, but with enums you can use namespaces right away, and they also support autoloading. If you use Composer, just make sure to use Composer 2.1. It was actually me who made the pull request, but I don't think they will bring the enum support to Composer 2 or Composer 1. So just make sure to update to Composer 2.1. And you can also define a type. So say you have a type saying integer or string, you can declare this enum with this type, and all of these members can have a value. We have more examples in the later, but it must be string or integer. You cannot have floats, you cannot have Boolean values, you cannot have class constants. They have to be string or integer. You can have class constants as well. Like I said, they are very similar to class objects. You can have constants as long as they are not the same. They are not duplicated with members and class constants. They can have static methods. So each of the enumerated types, you can have any of these custom methods that you like to add. This works. You can have non-static methods as well, so it also works. And if you try to see what's in this with the $this sign, with the class, that's the whole class itself, or the whole object itself. But with this, enumerated type itself. So you can compare this to this, and this will be the truth as well. All of these enums, they have a special property called name. You don't have to declare it. It just PHP does this for you. So this special name name property, it's then the value of the enum, like here. There's also a value. That's the value of this enum. Now, not all of the enums have this value property, because some of these enums, they don't have values in the first place. We also have examples of in all of these cases, of course. And this is PHP 8.1 enums in summary. The first example we saw before with post status, draft, pending, written, and published. This is what we call a unit. It's a real name that we use in PHP. Internally, all of these unit enums, they implement an interface called unit enum. And from the interface, there's only a method called cases. Like we talked before, the name will be here. When you try to access the name property, you will get the name. So enums will have a name. And the method called cases, it will return an array of all the enums that you have within this named enum. It's an array of enum objects, not an array of names. We also have this example that we assigned them values, like they can be integers or strings. This is what we call backed enums, and they extend the unit enum interface, also implement a new interface. So these are the two types we have with enums, unit enums and backed enums, and that's it. Sorry. With backed enums, there are two more methods because they have a value here. Backed enums provide you a method to get the enum back from a string. Say, for example, if you have this value from the database, if you take this value from the database, say the post ID is 5, and then the title is here, and the post status is pending as a string. So if you would like to get the enumerated type back, you can use from or try from method to get the type back. We do have examples. Again, name is here because it extends unit enums. And the new property called value is here, and it will be the string or integer value. So this value will always be integer or string. The two new methods called try from and from, they work exactly the same if you try to take the enum back from a valid string. Here, try from and from, this is a valid one, this is declared, so this is fine. Both of these methods will return the enum back, the object back from these functions. But the difference is with the try from function, you will return null if there's no such enum. From the from method, you will get a type error, sorry, a value error, because this is not a valid value. So depending on the context, if you like to return null if there's no such enum, you can use try from, or if you like PHP to throw an exception, use the from method. And this is backed enums in summary. We will also take a look at some of the semantics enums, basically the idea behind enums. So like I said before, enums are a type. So we can use them anywhere that you use a type. Say it can be a parameter, it can be the return type, it can be a property or anything. It works as a type. And PHP will throw type errors if we try to pass an invalid member to this function or the property. And it's contained. So like from the example from the post, and we define a bunch of constants, they are contained because we have a fixed number of elements, fixed number of enum members, and we give it a name. So it's contained within here, and they are fixed. So this is very important, that the number of enums you have in one enumerated type is fixed. You cannot add new ones later, you cannot remove ones, you cannot extend enums. The number of members you have in one enum is just fixed. So because this is a type, here I'm just trying to show how the type errors work. Here we have this function called playCard, and then we accept any value from suit, and then a card as a string. Here we try to pass a valid one, so PHP will be fine, no exceptions. But if we try to pass any values, say from a different enum, or just a string, or it's a different type, PHP will throw a type error saying it must be of this type suit. You don't have to do this by yourself now. So this is the first thing, the first advantage we have with enums is that the type validation. PHP will do this everywhere that we use it as a type. And this is a closed set, as in all the values are contained in the class, and you cannot add new ones, you cannot take the values, existing values away. So you can be guaranteed that if you declare an enum, these values will be fixed. So the members are fixed. This is probably the biggest difference between class objects and enums, is that if you create one class, and then with the same class name, with the same properties, and if you create another class with the same class name and the same properties, they wouldn't be the same. Because internally in PHP, every object has an ID, and it wouldn't be the same between two class objects. But with enums, they are the same. So you can compare a value that comes from, say, an API. You take this value from this JSON value, and then you take the enum type. And if you compare this with a value that comes from the database, that would be identical, exactly the same, because that's the semantics. Because it works as a type and it's not a data object, they are the same. So this is very important, because you can compare one enum to another, and as long as its back value or its name are the same, PHP will consider them to be same. And you cannot extend enums. With classes, you can extend classes unless it's declared final. But with enums, you cannot extend anything whatsoever. So if you declare one enum, say you have one enum for HTTP methods, you can be guaranteed that no one will add a new HTTP type, so your application or the HTTP handler will just crap out. So that's the advantage of enums, is that if you see a bunch of members, that's it. That's the only objects you have. And no properties allowed. So again, a difference between class objects and enums. With enums, you cannot add properties whatsoever, period. You cannot add dynamic properties. You cannot declare properties. You cannot try to overcome this with, say, by using a trait with the property. You cannot add properties whatsoever, not even static properties. There was RFC that ended last week to bring static properties to enums, but that failed. So no properties in enums. If you have a backed enum, remember the example that we have post status and then we assign it a name and a value. If you declare, if you tell PHP that I will declare this enum and add values from strings, you have to do it. You cannot have just a few members with values, so none. You have to declare a value for all of them. And the cases and the values must be unique as well. So the first example here, this is kind of given. You cannot have two class constants with the same name. You cannot have two class members the same name. But also, if you have a backed enum with a string or integer, they must be unique as well. It feels weird, but the reason is that there's two methods called from and try from. So they are guaranteed to give you an enum back, but these methods cannot return a specific enum if you have duplicate values, right? So these values must be unique as well. PHP will check all of these in the runtime, at the compile time, and if you try to do it, PHP will just throw. And like I said, they are very similar to classes. So they support names here. You can give it namespace. They support traits as long as they don't contain properties. They also support auto-loading. It works in Composer 2.1, or if you have any custom autoloaders, they will be called to load this file as well. They support magic constants. So with classes, you can use this _class _. It works in enums as well. And all of these magic methods, they work in enums as well. You can also use the instance of operator to see if this enum is instance of whatever the named enum that you like to see. And importantly, they support methods, static methods and non-static methods. You can add them a method, like, for example, here, I declare this method called showOff, and that just works. Usage examples. So we go back to the same enum. We always take the same enum. And we have this example from the post here. In the constructor, we say the parameter type status. So this is how we use enums as the parameter type, and this is how you would use as a property type. So it's the same. We just use it as a type, and the return type as well. If you want to put these values as a string or JSON API or anything else, or just even print them on screen, you can use this property called value. So this example, we try to select all the posts and post where the post status is one of these values. So it's an object, but if you access this property called value, we will actually, this is published here. This is what you'll get, and the database will see the string. Again, if you want to put them on database, you can use value, get status. This method will return an enum called from post status. and we use the value, the property called value that will be a string. What if you want to take the enumerator type back from a string? Now, imagine this is as a result from the database, or something that we get from an API, or the user input. We have the ID is 42, title is here, post status is published. Now, this is a string. We are trying to get the object, the enum object back. To do this, we use this method called from. Because this is a backed enum, they have the try from and from methods. So we use the method called from with the string here, post status, and PHP will return the enum type. Will return the enum type. Let's take a look how we can try enums today. So eval.org, 3v4l.org. This is very helpful. You can just type all of the enum that you try out and just click quick here, quick preview. It will show, it will run the latest PHP builds that already supports enums. So this should work. And from PHP Daily, they put new Docker images of PHP builds, well, daily. So you can try them out on Docker. What I do is I just compile PHP every day and just run it there. I was writing articles, a lot of articles, but there's one article that I explain how you can compile PHP. But of course, there's so many other great resources as well. And I'm not talking about them in the talk to keep it simpler. And about backwards compatibility, this is a very short section because, well, PHP doesn't, this is a new syntax. So all the PHP versions, say PHP 8.0 or PHP 7.4, or God help you 5.6, enums will not work. So this is the thing with enums. If you use enums, you need to make sure that this code will only run on PHP 8.1 or later. So I'm afraid that the adoption of enums would be a little bit slower than we like it to be. But that's one disadvantage of new syntaxes, right? Most of the private projects that I work on, I'm really excited to use enum, so I'm going to just change my composer requirements to say this will only run on PHP 8.1. But if you have projects, say WordPress, you cannot do this. So just be careful when you try to use enums, as excited as you might be. There's one library called PHP Enum. This is by far the most popular one. The syntax is different. As you can see, this is a class. It has the similar syntax using class constants, but it's, again, not compatible with the real PHP 8.1 enums because it's a new syntax. But if you like to have the same methods or something similar, the semantics of enums, you can use this library. I was using this before, so I was very happy with this library. And I have a list of further resources. The slide is available to download, so you don't have to take a note here. These are some of the further resources. If you have any questions, please do ask them on the session chat or Slack, or just email me on Twitter, or just, you know how to reach out to someone. And thank you to the captioning, Andrew, I think, and everyone for attending. Cal, everyone, it's a wonderful conference. So thank you so much.
Hey, don't go anywhere yet. You've got 10 minutes and a lot of questions. Let me see if I can find, oh, hey, okay. Leon asked, you said don't create 1,000 linked enums. Is there any performance hacks for using enums versus arrays?
So I like to say 10,000 just like a joke, but each of these types will be an object. So I don't think anyone has done in benchmarks, but I'm afraid if you have an array of 10,000 objects, 10,000 values, and enum with 10,000 members, I think that would take a little bit more memory. I didn't do any research, but this is just like a primary observation.
Okay, Robin asks, are there any plans to add more data types to enums in addition to int and string?
I'm not sure, because it's not easy to compare float values, for example, and we already have Boolean for well, true and false. So I think it would make things more complicated. And the fact that we have backed enums is mainly because we set them to API, so just print them on the screen. So it makes sense to have strings and just integers.
Very good. Okay, since the PSRs don't currently cover enums, what's the preferred naming nomenclature? Is it he's got an example here. Marco put an example where post status : active with a capital A, or active with all capital letters.
I mean, again, I don't think we have any standard for this yet, but I would think, because enums work very similar to classes, we probably will go with the naming for the class names, and the enum name pattern should be the same. If we use all uppercase, it usually says it's a class constant. So we probably use like normal, the first letter is capital, and then the rest of the letters are just simple camel case.
That's valid. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Good to see you, my friend. Are the methods you create in enum, like show, only available on all the case entries?
If it's a static method, it will be valid. It will be available from the name. So I had the example called post status. That's the name of the enum. So if it's a static method, you call it as post status : and then the name. If it's a non-static method, then you have to use the member. So post status, published, and then the method name. So that's the difference between the static and the non-static one.
Okay. I'm going to skip a couple. Jeroen, that is a great question. And if you would ask that in the Slack channel, I'm sure everybody would be interested. But I'm trying to stick with things that have actionable intel. Let's see. Raymond asks, how would you implement enums in a project that uses an ORM like Doctrine, and Doctrine doesn't support enums?
I think if we come back to the fact that enums is the new concept we have, so I think we probably need some sort of adapter to take these values and convert them to objects, because there has to be some sort of layer to convert if we already have these values that accept strings or integers. So I think some sort of adapter would be the way to go.
Okay. And Erwin asks, are there advantages for using unit enums versus backed ones? Why use unit at all?
Yeah, it's true. Why use unit at all? I think most of the time backed enums would be the most useful form, because it's PHP. We always deal with strings most of the time. But say we have some sort of error handler that we don't have to show this to the users, but we need to parse some of these values between the two components in the application. So it doesn't make sense to have strings. I think HTTP methods would be like a good example, because sometimes we just parse two objects from the router to some sort of container, and between that we can just use objects. It doesn't have to be strings. But yeah, he's right. Most of the time, I think we will be just using strings and integers.
Very good. Ayesh, that was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. I learned an awful lot. I knew enums were coming, but that really kind of helped solidify it for me. Audience, I hope you got a lot of it out of it. If you didn't, feel free to go back and watch it again so you can pick up the stuff that you missed. All these will be posted on YouTube. Okay, we will be back at quarter till the top of the hour. So it's time to get up, stretch, go get another cup of coffee or whatever beverage you're consuming at the moment, and get ready, because we got another great speaker and we're going another great topic.